This is Sales Grit, the enterprise sales podcast dedicated to helping you win more deals and to help you separate yourself from the pack. I'm VK. Let's get after it. Hello, everyone. This is Vrahram Kadkhodaian. Welcome to Sales Grit, hosted by Prolifiq. We help teams sell smarter together and win more deals. I'm really excited to have an old friend of mine, Lee Riesterer with GRAYROCK Digital, join us. You know, Lee and I started working together about 15 years ago at a company called CDC Software, where Lee was running all of our services globally. And he took me under the wings to help me kind of learn the trade and learn the business of software sales. So it's an honor to have Lee on the podcast today. Lee, why don't you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your company?
Sure. Thanks, Ram. And it's great to reconnect with you after all these years. It's from those early days when you were a journey salesman to now CEO of Prolifiq. I'd like to think that I had something to do with it, but I know I didn't. But congratulations.
I know you did, more than you know.
Congratulations. So about myself, I've been in technology for over 35 years. I started my career at a company called Digital Equipment Corporation, which you're too young to probably remember, but DEC, as it was known, was the second largest computer company in those days. It's now, the vestiges of that are now found in Hewlett Packard and HP, which it ended up there through acquisitions. I started there as a sales rep, became a sales manager, and had a great career with digital for 9 years. Fast forward, spent some time, 3 years specifically, with SAP in a global role there, and ran one of the 5 lines of business through the indirect channel. So that was a new experience for me, where all of my sales had been through direct channels, running sales teams, to now running a global indirect channel through partners. And it was a great opportunity to be there. And that actually got me involved in what we today call the customer experience, or CX, portfolio of software products. Formerly, I think we used to call it the front office, but that's where I really got deep into the customer experience world. And it's been a lot of fun versus spending time more in the back office, ERP, which is where I cut my teeth early in my career. You know, I differentiate the two by in that back office world, you're talking about cutting costs and efficiency. But in the front office or the customer experience space, it's all about revenue and growth. Those are much more exciting conversations to have with prospects. I'm sure you would agree.
Totally, 100%. You know, the purpose of this podcast was really designed to help sellers, sales leaders, even decision makers in the C-suite, just learn more about the trade, be appreciative of how much goes into selling, building value, connecting with the customer, establishing trust, and then formalizing partnerships and seeing that through. So in your robust career with all the different roles that you have, Lee, how do you think going to market has evolved, and how do you see it continuing to evolve?
Great question. And the short answer is changed a lot. And there's a book that was actually published 20 years ago, and just last year was updated and reintroduced. It's called The Experience Economy. The author, Joe Pine, I've actually worked with Joe on some client engagements. And what he does is he kind of goes through the evolution of all the way starting back in the industrial area to now what he calls the experience economy that we live in. And he talks about how the nature of competition and therefore the nature of sales has changed dramatically. To put kind of a fine point on it, what he argues is that, in the old days when we sold commodities or goods, and then we evolved to services, today we compete based on experiences that we create. And it really begs the question is, how do we as salespeople create better experiences for our clients? Because it's an important consideration. I think about it from this perspective, to personalize it. You and I travel a lot, and we're out with clients a lot, and probably a lot of expensive dinners. And, we have a lot of choices where we could go when you think about steakhouses, right? And there's one steakhouse, I won't mention which one it is, but, I could go to Del Frisco, or I could go to, here in Atlanta, Chops. as an example, but those aren't the ones I go to. The one I go to is the one that consistently creates a better experience for me. You know, it's that old, remember that show Cheers?
Yeah.
Walking, everybody knows your name.
Yeah.
I'm not advocating that, but the point is that they know how to make a special experience for me. So that's where I go. So when we think about our business, what is it that is the experience that we can create? And Joe goes on to talk about experiences shouldn't just be ad hoc. You can actually design those experiences. And that's the work that he does, is actually helping clients think about that.
That's amazing. Yeah. So would you say it's fair to say that some of the best sales reps, some of the best professionals in our profession are creating that unique experience for the client where their competitors are falling short on that?
It is. And in fact, I would say, you know, when you think about where it's going in the future, if you're not doing that, your competition is thinking about it or perhaps already doing it, right?
Yeah.
But what underlies that is obviously first, you've got to build a relationship with that client, right? Built on trust and all the things that we talk about when you're relationship-based selling. But to do that, you know, requires knowing your customer, which is foundational to it, right? So you've got to do the research, you've got to understand their business, you've got to try to get to know the person, build that relationship. It doesn't happen overnight. And then how do you create those differentiated experiences? I think that's the key to the future.
That's amazing. So when you think about the obstacles that enterprise sales reps have, and you know what, just to give you give our listeners some context, when Lee and I met each other, I was on the direct sales side. Lee's organization, these team members were responsible for implementing the technology that I was selling direct. So we had a software part of the business, and then we had an implementation part of the business, right? But I think our challenges were very similar. And I think over time, the two roles have kind of morphed into one, obviously different disciplines and different expertise, but that trust and that value has to come through from the very first step of the sale of the technology, right? So when you think about the obstacles that enterprise sales reps have, what do you think those obstacles are in establishing that level of trust and driving that value that differentiates them from their competitors? What gets in the way?
Yeah, I think first is doing that research and getting to know your customer is part of it, and a big part of it. And so, you know, what is involved in doing that? Well, you need a lot of data, right? If you're going to do it, and you know, enter technology. You know, CRM has been a great tool, but I would argue probably for 80% of people that use CRM, they use it begrudgingly, right? Because it's mandated. You got to put your contacts in, right? But they're not using it as a tool to make them a better salesperson or learn more about their customer and just be more effective. And so I think that's a huge challenge. And so to the extent that that can be made easier and more efficient for the salesperson, that's a big win.
That's awesome. You know, I think back to one of the deals that I actually worked with you on. It was, I'm not going to mention who it was. It was a financial services company based out of Texas. And, you know, we probably had 50 meetings, flew out there probably 30 times. We were one of the final vendors to be selected. And the question around implementation kept coming up. And I'll never forget, I got on the phone with you and I said, Lee, you know, the budget is this, we need services to come in at this. And I'll never forget what you said to me. You're like, well, do they have their requirements mapped out? Do they know all the integration points? Have they selected their middleware? Do they know what their data flow looks like? Do they know what their end results are? You asked me a million questions. And we very quickly realized that their budget needed to increase. And I think, you know, when I look back at how successful that customer became, it all started because, number one, the budget that they had was half of what they needed. We were very upfront and honest with them about that budget. They opened up the budget a little bit more. We were more expensive than every other vendor. And you delivered on a successful project where we became friends and very close, trusted partners with that customer. And, you know, I'll never forget that, Lee. I thought it was one of the most interesting experiences of my professional career.
If I'm recalling the same opportunity, your memory's better than mine. You're younger too, so that helps. I recall we were invited in to give our presentation to the executive steering committee, and there was probably 18 to 20 people around that table. Yeah. And I think you put me in as the cleanup batter. I was the last on the docket. I didn't know what that meant, but I assumed it was maybe you wanted me to be the closer, not the least important. And I opened up by asking the people around the table, by show of hands, how many of you have been involved in an enterprise software initiative? And if recollection serves me correctly, I think 3 hands went up. And so, you think about that, and I think it's very typical that many, many times the people that are designated as part of the team have never walked down this path. They've never been on this journey. So they don't know what they don't know, right? So I think it actually reminds me of a sales scenario I had with an executive at Delta Airlines many, many years ago. And I was with a small consulting firm at the time, and the executive posed a question to me: what do you think I should use as criteria to choose my partner? And I was, I don't think I showed it, but I was bewildered by the question because I didn't have a prepared answer. And I blurted out, by the questions they ask. And I walked away from that meeting, oh my gosh, I blew it. That was just the dumbest answer. Only to realize probably 15 years later, it was actually a pretty good answer, because by the questions you ask, it can show what you know about the topic and how insightful it is. And it begs upon them to be able to respond with something, hopefully that answers your question. But oftentimes there aren't answers.
Right.
And so it immediately begins that process where the prospect says, wow, these guys know what they're talking about. I don't even know what the answer is to the question, right? So I think that's, again, another proof point that there's a great opportunity to come in as real advisors and guide the client and make them realize, as in that case, you guys don't know what this should cost because you don't even know the answers and you've never even done this before, right?
Right. And complete transparency. I remember, you were 3 times my senior, and I remember getting on the plane from Texas that day, and I'm like, God, Lee just torched this deal. It's over. And it was quite the contrary. They called me back and they're like, that guy Lee, can you come back next week? And it just established so much validity and trust and such a successful engagement thereafter, where I think you're right. Differentiating on those key points is key. So if we were to transition now, and if you're talking to some of the people that are listening to this, what advice would you give to an enterprise sales rep, someone that's in the trenches, someone that's trying to polish their skill set? What would you tell them to invest in, and how can they elevate their game?
There's a couple of thoughts that come to mind. It's a great question. One, I would tell them, don't chase the transaction, right? Really invest in the relationship. Mm-hmm. Customers, clients, they see it, right? They know if somebody's just in there to close a deal and then they're going to be gone. And to that point, I would actually argue, because I've lived on both sides of the fence, I've led sales organizations. I've also led consulting and professional services organizations. Maybe I'm a little biased here, but I would, it brings to mind the point that for an enterprise salesperson, know how to use your resources and when to use them. And so back to that story, you did a great job because you engaged me as the head of professional services team at the right point. I've actually had clients say to me when I was running services, I want to talk to you because I know the salesman's going to be gone after this deal, right? And they're going to live with the service organization, which is going to be the team that's either going to make them successful or not. Right. So for an enterprise salesperson, know how to leverage those resources, because the smart clients, the clients that have walked down this path, they know. And so that can be one of your greatest assets in the sales cycle, is bringing in the people that are going to actually deliver that success for the client.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely instrumental. And you know what I think what's also changed is the term of software versus SaaS, right? Just that change from a capital expense, the sales rep walking away, handing it over to the services professionals to actually deploy. And then, we've got this big, deal that we got done. And then every year thereafter, it's just maintenance versus the SaaS model where you've got to earn the right to do business every single day with that customer to ensure that you're driving that value, right? How do you think SaaS has impacted the industry?
Yeah, switching costs have gone way down, right? So the barrier to entry by a competitor is lessened. So you're absolutely right. It really does necessitate that whole notion of moving from being transactional to being relational. You've got to have that long-term relationship because you could be at risk every year, right? With a SaaS model. And so we got to rethink, how do we create the stickiness? And again, that's built on the relationship, I think.
That's awesome. Well, Lee, huge gratitude to you, my brother. Thank you for everything you've done to me or done for me during my career. It's always great seeing you. It's been too long, and thank you for joining me on today's podcast.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, Vrahram. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, everyone, let's get after it.